In choir, we used to warm up with silly little exercises like mayo, mayo, mayonnaise. Okay.
Oh,
All right, so I'm going to start something off here. Why, hello there, folks. And thanks for joining us for another Matinee Minutia. You're just in time. Matt and I are parking our cars, and we're about to head into this dead mall that he told me about the last time.
yeah. The mall itself isn't dead. No, I mean that
Ooh,
would be a big ghost, right? If the
right.
mall was dead, that would be scary.
I
But everything
mean,
else in it's dead.
I mean, it's just in time for, All Hallows Eve around the corner here. I mean,
Oh, that's true.
are
That's
we going to
true.
see? Have you seen any zombies in this place, Matt?
Uh, well, maybe we better just not. You don't bother them; they won't bother you. Just don't look them in the eye.
It's the ghost of the record club, right? They want to get their 5 pennies for a stack.
Well, they're still looking at the old Suncoast Motion Picture Company. Remember that store?
Oh, hey,
Suncoast?
I do, and that's a perfect
Yeah.
introduction because we're going to be talking about an '80s movie. So,
Hey, that's perfect. Yeah.
yeah, so we are going to be discussing a 1987 drama. There's a little bit of comedy and sort of an element of sci-fi in it, and it incorporates two legends from the days of radio. And a few years before, they had taken a step out from their break from Hollywood and joined us as the sweet old couple that was in several charming films from that time. But this movie also brings us up and coming actress Elizabeth Pena. And, well, I think that's my most special memory of this movie. So please take your seats. The show is about to begin. What do you get
When two movie
in TV nerds
wander aimlessly through
dead malls
movie theaters and drive-ins,
and talk about
their favorite shows along the way.
it's time
For Matinee Minutia
with your hosts, DJ.
and Matt.
Oh, so Matt, we're right out here in front of the old video store, and I'm getting a little nostalgic. Is this, what are
That's
your,
what that's the sharper image right there. It used to be the old sharper image. Yep, yep.
I think I have an old webcam that I got from there.
Yeah,
Uh,
yes, that's your personal business. Yeah.
uh,
But and the Sam Goody was right there.
mm, I remember many a shopping trip through there. I remember being able to put on headphones and listen to the music before, you had to have an iPod.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know why, but there's still a whole bunch of level 42 DVDs in there. Weird.
Did
I don't
you
know.
did you ever get into Laserdisc when that was a thing?
No.
No.
Actually, I have a friend who actually I listened to a podcast called Swan or Judd. Ever heard of that?
I think so.
Yeah. The Judd on there actually still collects and watches movies on Laserdisc,
Oh.
like old movies, probably that he finds off eBay and garage sales and stuff. But
You
yeah.
know, if memory serves, when Laserdisc was the thing, we hadn't yet arrived at digital audio. In fact, I think it was just sort of another way to present movies, and we were moving in the direction of CDs, but we hadn't decided that movies should be on the same size of disc as a music album. That same CD size.
Yeah, yeah.
In
Hey,
fact,
actually, for the movie tonight, I had to grab some stuff from the old thing over here.
hmm
This was a place called Radio Shack. Did you ever hear of
oh,
that?
yeah.
Yeah.
I had a VCR from there. They had their own store brands, and it reminded me of the Transformers because one of their brands was Optimus.
Wow. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that takes me back. I used to go in the Radio Shack all the time to get blank cassettes. Until they started having them where you could get them for like a bucket, like, you know, I don't know, Target or Payless, Memorex.
Oh yes, is it real or is it Memorex?
Oh, it was Memorex. It was always Memorex, especially with my boyfriends.
I remember I had all of these cassettes, not audio cassettes, but VHS tapes when I used to record Star Trek: The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine off of broadcast TV, folks. And
Oh,
it was one of those things where if you didn't label it correctly, you didn't know what was on the tape. And of course, I had to eventually move out on my own. And well, it's my own fault because I didn't take it with me. So a lot of those tapes got recorded over by Dad, and I couldn't tell you what was on it. Probably just something very boring and starched shirt. But anyways, 1987, Matt, is
yeah.
when Batteries Not Included came out. Now, that kind of is a naughty title, if you ask me, but this
Maybe
show,
back then.
right? I mean,
Now we have chargers.
yeah, well, I mean, it used to be that all the good stuff was the things that wouldn't work unless you got the batteries. So all those commercials had to come with that disclaimer, batteries not included.
Yeah.
So 1987, we're going to tell you a little bit about what was going on in the world then. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan gave his first speech on AIDS at a benefit dinner in May of that year. The speech was a turning point in the fight against AIDS. Kind of, at least he was talking about it.
Finally.
Mm-hmm. Ronnie and Soviet Premier Gorbachev, the gentleman with the fabulous birthmark, signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in Washington, D.C. So two old white guys decided that they were going to try to play nice with their bathtub toys.
Pretty much.
And on November that year, 22nd, just before Thanksgiving, an unidentified man wearing the Max Headroom mask interrupted television stations WGN-TV and WTTW. Don't ask me what that stands for, but it was in Chicago, and the mystery of who was behind the interruption remains unsolved. Do you remember Max Headroom?
Nope. I
No?
remember Max Headroom, but I don't remember that incident going on. But yeah, oh yeah, Max Headroom. That was big. That was big.
I
That was like
remember.
technology, man.
Oh, yeah. Now, the actor who was Max Headroom is a man by the name of Matt Frewer. If you look him
Yes.
up, he's been in many things and he's done some voice work as well. I was actually privileged to go to a convention where he was a guest a while back, and I believe one of
Oh,
the collaborations that he got involved with at one point were a few episodes of Pinky and the Brain.
oh, I love Pinky and the Brain. He had his own show for a while too,
Mm-hmm.
where he was like raising a son or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember he was actually on that show. He was a master debater.
Yeah. I
So,
just I just remember he
and a
had
doctor.
Uh, I just remember that he had a very memorable guest appearance on Star Trek: The Next Generation because he was the guy from the future who was stealing all of their tech because, well, he wasn't really from the future.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Mhm. So, aside from that, folks, other things that happened in 87 that were pretty important. Americans were allowed to drive 65 in a lot of states. I remember that because growing up in New York, it was 55 for the longest time. And you knew if you went on a road trip out of state when you were getting back to your home state because, well, let's just say the highway department took better care of their roads than other places. You could be
Hmm.
sleeping in the car and then you would wake up because you would hear ka-thunk, 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 ka-thunk. And it's, yeah, road quality. And in 87, the Giants won the Super Bowl that year. And
Wow.
in the world of nature, in preservation, the dusky seaside sparrow, which I'm sorry, that sounds like it would be the name of a drink at a vacation resort.
Mm.
But it was a species of bird in that was native to Florida became extinct, or at least was recorded as being extinct in 87. Because sometimes we take a while to realize something has happened.
That's true, but I'll have a dusky sparrow, please.
Yes, I mean that also sounds like something you could ask for at a bar, and it might be under the bar, but
Huh, maybe. You never know. Well, you know what? There was a lot of people actually born that day that are, part of our culture and our the things we watch and listen to these days, including, well, a certain hottie named Zac Efron.
Mm.
Yes, I've been to Zac Efron. Have you? And Hilary Duff, of course, who's had 3 or 4 comebacks, is doing Christmas movies now, I believe. And Michael B. Jordan, one of our superheroes. Yes,
Mm.
yeah. He challenged for the Black Panther. Remember that?
Oh, I
Remember he was
don't.
the one that challenged the original Black Panther. He's like, I want to be Black Panther.
Oh.
Yes. And then we have Kesha, or if you're appropriate, key $ ha. We also have Elliot Page, trans man and wonderful actor from the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
We have Blake Lively, who is apparently very big, but I don't know.
Married to
I don't know
Ryan
who she is.
Reynolds.
Oh, is that who she is?
Yeah,
I
she's
don't
Mrs.
like her.
Reynolds.
She's married to my third or fourth husband there. I
I will
haven't
s-
decided which to name
I,
him. Yeah.
I will say that
Hmm.
that version of Amityville Horror that Mr. Ryan Reynolds was in the early days of his career, uh, it,
Yeah.
it had an impression on me, mostly to do with the pajamas and being out in the rain.
Yes. He's quite a man. So lucky her. And then we have Kevin Jonas, the hottest of the Jonas Brothers, and Kendrick Lamar. We have Darren Criss
Oh,
from Glee
yes.
fame.
Pr- Pretty boy who has been interviewed in more recent years as saying
You
that
better.
he would not voluntarily play a gay role again.
Right, which is I don't know. I just find that whole thing ridiculous. If you can play a role, you should play a role,
Hmm.
and I have no problem seeing him be gay. So yeah. Singer Tove Lo from No One Dies from Love, which is a really incredible video, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Another Glee actress, Naya Rivera, who sadly has left us far too early. And then singer Aaron Carter, who's actually coming to our mall soon.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, that gives me some Tiffany vibes.
Well, at least Tiffany would put on probably a little better show. But who knows? I mean, Aaron's still going after a lot of loss in his family lately.
Mm. So, Matt, Batteries
Hmm.
Not Included was a movie. I mean, we're standing out inside
Yes.
of a video store, but this wasn't no rental place. They actually sold things because before the days of streaming, if you wanted to watch something, you probably had to buy a copy, especially if it was your favorite. I mean,
Oh, yes.
I mean that's one of our things in this household is that you never know when they're going to take some of those titles off the streaming services. So if it's your favorite, support
Or
the art,
just change them.
right? Support the artist in the art form, buy a copy. Because
Hmm.
I don't know how much the talent in films make from something just being streamed. I have to assume that it's probably not the same as a purchase. But I might have to ask Anthony Rapp about that because he's the vice president of the Screen Actors Guild.
Oh, is he?
Yes, and Fran Drescher is the president.
I know, Mrs. Sheffield, Mrs. President. Oh, I love her. Well, yeah.
I mean, it's a similar theme, though, here. She played sort of a domestic, and we have someone who played a domestic in this film. But anyways, I was getting at this was a movie. That's the short form. It was on the silver screen, or at least the screen that used to be silver. And in theaters in '87, some of the movies that came across your view on date night were things like Beverly Hills Cop 2, Eddie Murphy's second movie in that.
Yes.
We also had Platoon, and if I'm not mistaken, it had a very peppered cast of talent, including Mr. Sean Penn,
Yes.
Madonna's future ex-husband.
And Charlie Sheen, who shall remain nameless.
Now, I'm going to get the cast wrong on this, so you'll just have to tell me. Fatal Attraction was that movie that animal lovers should never watch.
That is true. That is very true.
It's about a bad breakup mostly. And who was in the lead in that one?
That was Michael Douglas and oh my gosh, I had it like a minute ago and now it's blank. I'm blanking on it.
I just know it was probably not Kathleen Turner.
No, but they did a lot. They did a lot together. But no, and actually, she said that she absolutely loved the role. But basically, it was Michael Douglas had an affair with this woman, and that she became obsessed with him. Absolutely, it was creepy. And I'm going to look that up while you're telling us about.
Yes. And speaking of affairs, a similar theme. Another movie in '87 that was popular in the theaters was The Untouchables. Now, unlike the title, where it makes you think it's a little bit naughty, it was actually about mobsters.
Well, you hoped, but Glenn Close.
Glenn Close. Oh, you got close. Yeah. It was Glenn Close.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we also talked about another movie that was popular in '87 because it had Steve Guttenberg and Tom Selleck, and who was that other guy again? Oh yeah, Ted Danson. Three Men and a Baby. Here's a movie that I have not seen, The Secret of My Success.
Well, yes, that was Michael J. Fox and Joan. No, Michael J. Fox. It wasn't Joan Jett, was it?
I'm not sure, but every time I hear that name, it reminds me of another movie that's not related, Bright Lights, Big City, which I know.
That's the one with Joan Jett.
Okay.
Yeah, Helen Slater.
Helen Slater. Oh, Supergirl Helen Slater?
Yes, Supergirl Helen Slater.
Now I have a reason to go back and watch that.
You should. It's a fun movie.
Yeah. Also Stakeout, which I don't know what it's about. I'm assuming it's Stakeout.
I think that was Eddie Murphy. Let's see.
Oh, he had 2 movies that year. Well, you know what they say. His kids were going to college.
No, totally wrong. Richard Dreyfuss, Emilio Estevez, Madeline Stowe.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So one of Martin Sheen's kid had a paycheck in that one. And then we had the very first Lethal Weapon movie before Mr. Mel Gibson discovered he had a tinfoil hat in his sock drawer. And then, of course, The Witches of Eastwick, which this time of year is just, what do you call it? One of those things you drag.
A mess.
Well,
oh yes, traditional. Yeah,
traditional. You much like the relatives, you drag it out every year and dust it off, and you have fun watching it because it has Cher in it. And
I tried to watch it recently, and I just couldn't make it through it.
Yeah. And then Predator, which I don't remember who's in it, but I just know that it's.
That is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger and Predator. Yes, my mother watched this movie so many times. So I watched this movie so many times.
I just know that it's in the same universe as the Alien movies with Sigourney Weaver. So, so that means that it was done by Ridley Scott.
Yes.
Okay. So, Matt, since we're talking about a movie, we want to inspire the folks. We want to tell them about the storyteller, the man behind the camera or person, but who put together this thing that we call Batteries Not Included that we're going to talk about?
Well, actually, it's a guy named Matthew.
Oh,
Yeah.
what a
So that's
coincidence.
all you need to know. It's no,
Right.
actually, Matthew Robbins, who was born in 1945, and basically he was a screenwriter, a film director, and he was actually known for writing within what was called at the time the American New Wave movement. And he worked with some really huge filmmakers like George Lucas, Walter Murch, Steven Spielberg, obviously. And then we had, well, some of his biggest films. Buckle in for this, okay?
Okay.
The Sugarland Express,
Mm.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Oh,
and
favorite.
Jaws.
Mm.
I mean, he worked with some of the big names, big movies. He's got a great career. He also wrote a lot with filmmaker. Let me make sure I get this right. Guillermo del Toro.
Yes.
Del Toro. So, so they worked really well together. Of course, they did Pinocchio. If you like that movie,
I have not seen it yet. This is the newer one, right?
Yeah, watch something else. So then, of course, he he co-wrote that, I should say. So, but take that for what you will. Mimic and Crimson Peak. Do you remember Crimson Peak?
I do. That
yeah.
That didn't have oh, what's his name? He's been in other things, but from Harry Potter. No, I'm thinking of the woman in black.
Okay, yeah. No. Daniel?
Yeah, Daniel
Mr.
Radcliffe.
No, I don't think so.
Crimson Peak was about a house that was sinking. Wasn't it?
I have not seen it.
Oh,
so
I think
I'm
you
not
should.
Sure. Yeah.
It was good. I'm not a huge horror fan. I'm more interested in films that are suspenseful, but sometimes there's a fine line where directors are able to accomplish a little of both, and those are the films that I find have the most talent, because anybody can squirt a bottle of ketchup and make you go ew, but if you can build up to it happening, that's the suspenseful.
Yeah, I was with somebody that was into that. It was ugly, but actually Doug Jones was in that. So, and Tom Hiddleston. So, might be worth a good watch.
And for those not in the know, Doug Jones is a Star Trek connection here, because he played Mr. Saru in Star Trek Discovery,
who was mentioned to be one of the most interesting characters in Star Trek.
Because we are discussing the season of gloom and doom, as I've heard it called before. Mr. Doug Jones, of course, was also in the 90s pop culture phenomenon Hocus Pocus as the boyfriend done wrong and all stitched up.
That's true. that is very true. And he was one of the heroes of the film, too. So, Mr. Robbins also, he went to Johns Hopkins University. He went to the USC School of Cinematic Arts and the AFI Conservatory. So he was very well educated in films, and he received a Distinguished Alumnus Award from Johns Hopkins in 2004. Also, he then went on in 2011 to do some work with the Indian cinema, where he wrote the screenplay for Seven Kun Maaf and also later Rangoon, both which were directed by Vishal Bhardwaj.
I see.
Yeah.
And I hopefully this doesn't come off as sounding like I'm too racist, but in my defense, I grew up in the haystack and we didn't have much culture there, so I'm still working on that, I guess you'd say. But speaking of Indian culture, I can't tell you how many times I have gone out to dinner, and it would be an Indian restaurant, for example, and there'll either be some sort of a rugby match on, or there will be a movie showing.
Mm.
And there are so many times that I wish that they would have had the captions on, because I'll sit there during dinner watching the movie and it's just like, oh my God, this is interesting. This is not like the clones of things that we produce in American entertainment. This has actually got an original story. Can I understand what they're saying? And I want to say, and I can't be for certain, but an example that I have experienced of modern cinema culture where there was a person of not American descent who made the film was Bend It Like Beckham. I believe that that was a person of Indian extraction who directed that film, and I found it rather enjoyable because it was set in the United Kingdom, so of course it wasn't going to have just pretty people in it. But B,
Mm.
it was also rather diverse because it featured a storyline of women in sports. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I hear tell that we are at about the halfway mark in this show. So, for your listening enjoyment, we will feature a brief interlude of nostalgia through jingles and, well, ads. Okay, and we are back. So, we just talked about the man behind the camera, the storyteller, the director of this film, Batteries Not Included, which came out in 1987. Now, Matt, I know that you were a few classes ahead of me in the School of Life, but was
Well,
this was this something that you caught when it was new? Did you go to the theater and see it, or were your family not the movie-going sort that chapter of your life?
oh no, no. I was lucky to be able to see things like Goonies and things like that, but no, we experienced some times of being homeless and going through some things where movies were just not in the budget at all. So, but when VHS came out, when we were able to have our own VCR, this was actually one of our favorite films for a while. So we watched it a number of times and absolutely loved it.
Hmm. I myself did not see it when it was new either. Um, I think that we might have seen it on one of the many infamous fall time frames when they would give you a free preview weekend of one of those movie channels.
Oh
And
yes,
and
yes.
that was one of my dad's guilty pleasures, was that because he couldn't be outside doing yard work and he was a stay-at-home dad, mom let dad have HBO during the winter months. That was his treat.
Oh,
And I remember on the same vein there, being able to watch Fraggle Rock because that was on HBO, and I had to
mm.
be I had to be a good little so and so if I wanted to watch Fraggle Rock.
Yep.
but but Batteries Not Included in 87. Wow. I probably saw it maybe a handful of years later when it was on one of the movie channels. And I just remember having a fondness for this, an affection, because I was an odd duck. Being the youngest of four kids, I was used to having to relate to those older than me. So I had an unusual sense of aging. I knew that my grandparents were older than mom and dad, but I couldn't tell you how old they were, and I hadn't decided that the age my grandparents were was old. I just knew that they had cool stories of what life was like when they were growing up. And so things like Batteries Not Included appealed to me because Hume, Cronyn, and Jessica Tandy's characters were the kind of people I liked to hang out with when I was a kid. My best friend when I was 7 years old was the 80-something-year-old lady who lived across the street with her nurse daughter. So we're going to tell you about the cast, the folks who came together to tell this story. And in front of the camera, there was a older couple who had experienced the heyday of their fame when radio was in people's homes, and the likes of Gracie Allen and um, George Burns were entertaining folks in their living room, while Hume Cronyn and Jessica Tandy, they were not each other's first dance there. Each of them had had life before then and got married another time. And, you may not be aware of this, ladies and gentlemen, and, anyone in between, but Jessica Tandy actually liked to, past tense, because she's no longer with us, liked to curl her pinky with her cup of tea, because she was born across the pond there in Merry Old England. Apologies to our friends in the UK, but that was my attempt at, being sort of British. But Hume Cronyn and Jessica Tandy played Frank and Faye Riley, who were the charming older couple that were at the heart of the story, Batteries Not Included. Now, before... I'm sorry. I blinked for a moment there, and maybe I need a nap. More coffee. Jessica Tandy and her husband would appear in 13 films together. They were used to being a team. They began acting together way back in 44. So, when the baby boomers kids were in kindergarten, that's when they started appearing in films together. Now, before then, in the 80s, before the 80s, their last film would be 2 decades before, in 1959, with Laurence Olivier, a legend in his day. Now, Jessica Tandy and Hume Cronyn's most memorable films include a film from 82, which we discussed in a past episode of Matinee Minutia, The World According to Garp, which starred Robin Williams and Glenn Close, and I thoroughly recommend this. There she is again. Yes. It was that itself is just a wonderful film because it explored a couple going through a difficult time in their life, and it showed you that life goes on. Although I won't give away the ending, but it is an experience. But either way, like every Robin Williams film, it's something to behold. So also to follow up that, once they returned to the silver screen in the 80s, they then appeared in a Steven Spielberg, no, I'm sorry, not Steven Spielberg, a Ron Howard film, which actually may have been his first direction, but they starred in 85 in Cocoon, with, everybody's favorite charming grandfather that did commercials for oatmeal and diabetes supplies, Mr. Wilford Brimley. And, of course, Matt's favorite, soap opera-style guy, Steve Guttenberg.
And, of course, you do realize that both of us are older than Wilford Brimley was when he did Cocoon.
Oh! Well, I just hope that there's been less lead paint.
There you go.
I just hope that there's been less asbestos and lead paint in our lives.
Well, I don't know about that. But...
Oh, and there Matt has a stack of paint chips he's chewing on. So, I mean, but that's the landlord's fault. It's not his problem. Anyway, so following up Cocoon, they were in Batteries Not Included that we're discussing tonight. In the same year, they appeared in a movie called Foxfire with the famed John Denver, who wrote the song about leaving on a jet plane. Now, it's sad, but it's ironic because he came to an early demise in a private plane. So there you go. But
Yes, yes.
Foxfire was a story about an elderly couple in the Blue Ridge Mountains, roundabout near where Dolly Parton grew up, practically. Mhm. And in that story, the wife survived her husband. We'll get back to that. But in Cocoon, The Return, they came back as the charming couple in 1988, the year after Batteries Not Included. Now, you may not have seen Cocoon, The Return because, well, it didn't do as well at the box office. But if you blinked, you missed it because it had Elaine Stritch in it.
Yeah.
And Matt, I know that that author guy that you resemble is fond of his British comedies. I recently discovered something through my favorite free service, Tubi, and it was a
Oh.
show that came out in the 70s with a much younger Elaine Stritch than I ever experienced. It was a show called Two's Company. Are you aware of this phenomenon?
No.
Oh my goodness, you should go out and gurgle that because
Okay.
it's a delight to behold. It lasted 4 British seasons, which means it had like 20 episodes. But
Okay.
Elaine Stritch plays an American author who has moved to England to settle down and enjoy a quieter life. But she writes mystery type stories, and she ends up with an English butler, of course, because I mean, you're in England, but she's quite the character because her character does not like typical English people, and he is a very typical English person, but they have chemistry. You should go look for Two's Company, folks. I recommend it. With Elaine Stritch. And Cocoon The Return in 88 also featured an up-and-coming Courtney Cox 5 whole years before she was in Friends.
What? That's
Yeah.
impossible.
So, continuing on about Hume, Cronyn, and Jessica Tandy, in 93, the couple would appear in a film called To Dance with the White Dog. And this was I think it was a Hallmark film, one of the early examples of that genre. And this starred the actress from sort of my part of New York. She was originally from Buffalo, Christine Baranski, who is the star these days of HBO's. I'm forgetting the title of it right now, but show about money
The Good
and
Wife.
no, it's the one about
Sister Wife.
no, like it's
The Good
basic
Law.
nothing good is in the title. It's basically about robber barons and JP Morgan Chase kind of a thing. Anyways, Christine Baranski is in a series on HBO lately that's a period piece and it's very entertaining. So anyways, To Dance
The
with the
Good
White.
Fight.
No good is in it. You're momentato while I look it up.
I am looking it up, but it's
You
not.
are?
It's not. Yeah, it's just not popping up here.
Okay, well, let me type in Miss Christine Baranski.
Shows. The Good Fight is the last one listed. Praise Petey
Let's see here.
is 2003. Young Sheldon.
The Gilded Age.
Oh, you should. Okay.
So
Gotcha.
the Gilded Age on HBO is a period show about the
And
Amer.
actually,
Mhm.
a friend of ours, a mutual friend of yours, is related to a lot of people that are historically are in that show. By the way.
Oh, and it has, and I'm forgetting her name, but a former star of the Sex and the City series is also in Gilded Age.
Yes.
The one who's not related to the former president, Cynthia Nixon.
Cynthia Nixon, absolutely love her. She's a lesbian.
Oh,
Yes,
so
she's wonderful.
So speaking of Dancing with White Dogs, that was in 93. And the turn on that is that in '87, Hume, Cronyn, and Jessica Tandy did a movie about a woman who survived her husband. And one of their last films together was about a husband who survives his widow. In To Dance with the White Dog, a grieving widower is reunited with his late wife's spirit in the company of a stray dog. So, oh, alrighty. So, as we've mentioned before, every movie is based upon a greater story, a play, if you will, an act of theater. So the story is presented in 3 acts usually. The beginning of the story is Act 1, the exposition. As the story unfolds on the streets of a neighborhood ruined by progress, an older woman is seen walking a street that was once familiar, but her routine seems unshaken by reality. So, Matt, when you first saw this, what was your
Mm-hmm.
take on that opening scene? Because I know for me, I just felt that it was a, you know, stereotypical crazy old woman who has just lost her way. But upon second and third viewings and more recent rewatches, I understood that you got insight into her character right from the first moment because she
Mm-hmm.
wasn't wandering. She knew where she was, or at least she thought she did.
Yep. Yeah, she knew right where she was, and she went to the store, and the store just wasn't there. And it gave a perfect opening into what was going on. And not only that, but she was wearing 2 different shoes. So it gave you okay, she's maybe not all there. And yeah. Yeah, I mean, you just were sucked right into it right away.
Yeah, because I was, I all in initial viewings, I thought to myself that she was confused and she thought she had gotten home because
Mm-hmm.
where they lived was not not too dissimilar a building. But of course, you realize she's pulling a shopping cart. And
Right.
that's part of why she is where she was, because she had planned an afternoon. So
Mm-hmm.
upon further viewing, it says you said she meant to go to the store, and when she got there, the store wasn't there anymore. So that's not her fault. Maybe it was torn down that day. Maybe it was torn down weeks ago. It's not really revealed, but it makes you
Right.
wonder about her character and what her place is in the story.
Well, and like if she got there, like would she have had money? Would she have done her shopping? And I just another thing that struck me just as odd is they run a restaurant in this
Mm-hmm.
film.
Mm-hmm.
Restaurants need supplies,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole area is being torn down. Like they didn't have any daily deliveries or anything. Where did they get all the supplies to feed all the people?
Right.
Like fresh meat and everything. I'm just like, what?
and
No.
and it's just so terrific because just like other characters Jessica Tandy has played in this time, which a
Hmm.
few years later she was in Driving Miss Daisy, which she at least got award nominated for. But everyone
Hmm.
thinks that she's lost her marbles, and she says to them, I was going to do the marketing. Somebody has to do the marketing.
Right. Well, and I well, anyway, we might discuss that later, so I'll save that.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
So Matt, another
Hmm.
member of the cast who was quite important, was an up-and-coming actress who played sort of the young love, the ingenue, I guess you'd say, of the
Hmm.
story. Tell us about Miss Elizabeth Pena.
Well, she was up and coming as far as movies and such. However, she was actually very well um, entrenched in the acting lifestyle at that point. But she played Marissa Estevol, who let's see, she was born. Her parents went to New Jersey, and they were Cuban born. So that's where she got a lot of her influence. And she grew up actually immersed in the arts because her father was a playwright and a director. And actually, he founded the Latin American Theater Ensemble in New York. So
Wow.
that's where she got a lot of her background. And in 1975, she herself co-founded the Hispanic Organization for Latin Actors called
Hola.
Hola. Yes. And she herself actually, she was born in the, I believe, the 40s. No. She was born 1951. I had it here somewhere, but
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
Before before the Cold War and when we stopped talking to Cuba.
yeah, because she was only like 10 years older than me. So it would have been like 1960, 1961. Anyway, so she went to the High School of Performing Arts, where she graduated in 1977.
Fame, I'm gonna live forever.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, she would have right around the time that show would have been like starting, kind of going, getting ready to go. That would have been her era. And her first film was El Super in 1979. And it was a comedy about Cuban refugees adjusting to life in Spanish Harlem. And she was in several big hit movies, including La Bamba, which actually came out, I believe, the same year or the year after. And, well, we'll talk about something related to that a little bit later. She was also in Jacob's Ladder, Rush Hour, and she voiced the character of Mirage in The Incredibles. Yeah, much later. Also, her role in Lone Star actually got her the Independent Spirit Award. So, anyway, she directed a lot of television. She was uh, she wielded tons of influence and advocacy for Latinx actors and performers, which was really, really needed in the community, especially in the 80s. And sadly, she passed away in 2014. She was only 55, and it was from cirrhosis of the liver, which is usually brought on from alcoholism. But we don't know, just cirrhosis of the liver.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're actually recording this on the October 12th, and it will be 10 years. So October 14th. So 2 days from now, it'll be 10 years since she passed away, which is interesting in that the other actor who was mainly Latino in this movie passed away 25 years before she did.
On the same day.
On the same day, yeah.
So Matt, another important thing to note in Elizabeth Pena's career was one of her later acting roles, one of her last acting roles. She played opposite Sofia Vergara on Modern Family as her mama.
Yes, she did. She sure did.
And more importantly, or at least to me, in my burgeoning youth, I remember watching network television around the time that Batteries Not Included was new. And this is a teaser maybe because, next year, before we sign off for the summer, we're going to be discussing a mid to late 80s film, which had my favorite pop artist at the time, Cyndi Lauper. But it had Elizabeth Pena in it. Now, what I'm getting at, folks, was that Elizabeth Pena in this period of her career, when Batteries Not Included came out, as between other movies that she was doing, she got to be the star on a network television show. It was short-lived. It only had a single season, but it was quite controversial. It was called I Married Dora. If you look this up, there are episodes that have been preserved for posterity out there on the YouTubes because, the networks don't want to claim responsibility for this. because it aired in the heyday of a Republican administration, and she
Mm.
played a El Salvador born uh, domestic and a maid who fell in love with her employer, and they got married for a green card. So I married Dora. Also in the cast of this TV show starred an up and coming young Juliette Lewis as the daughter. And this
This is
was,
ringing bells for me. Oh my gosh, I remember this show.
and they went down in history because on their final episode, they broke the fourth wall. The character of the head of the household, the man, the husband, was heading out of town on business. His work was sending him away, so they had a goodbye scene in the airport, which
Yeah.
was presented as though it were maybe a cliffhanger because they were, at least halfway through the season at the time. But then the character comes back through the gates at the airport to talk to Elizabeth Pena's character, and he says to her, "It's been canceled." And she says, "What, your flight?" And he says, "No, our show." And then the cast takes a bow, and there's applause, and that was the end of the series.
Wow.
They actually
That's so sad.
they actually even felt obligated to present a disclaimer in the opening credits of the show, in case anybody was wondering, telling them that it was illegal to marry somebody to get citizenship. Now, I, I ask you, if anybody who has done any work in the realm of genealogy, uh,
Mhm.
how fair you think that is, because I can tell you that just a generation before the Cold War, it was
Mm.
perfectly legal for somebody who was in love to get married and become a naturalized citizen. We only decided we were going to stigma that when we got conservative leadership, and it's suddenly a conspiracy. People can't be
Yeah.
getting married because they're in love. No, they have ulterior motives.
Hmm. Yeah, this series, Daniel Hugh Kelly was also was the actor in it. Um, I remember this show, and I thought it was a really fun show. And this was the same year; it came out the same year as Batteries Not Included. So,
Yeah.
and and it's interesting because not only did this kind of break a little, something here too, but in the movie, she plays an unwed, pregnant mother. Well, not a mother, but she's going to be a mother. A young, and it was never a negative. Nobody chastised her. She didn't have some big excuse that the father died. I mean, it was, and nobody, it was not a negative. And even Jessica Tandy's character at one point said, "You're going to love being a mother." Nobody shamed her. And that for 1987, especially, they would have had any other movie or TV show would have had the father died and her being on her own and some sob story to explain that she wasn't like a fallen woman going around sleeping with you know guys when she wasn't married to them.
Hmm. And that this element of the story that Matt's referring to with her character is an important one because in the first act, we discovered this older woman who's maybe lost her focus on reality.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole building is full of people who have lost hope. And as Matt had said, Marissa, Elizabeth's character in this movie, is an expecting mother. And she's not really in a committed relationship. Her boyfriend is a musician and he's out on the road, or at least that's the story that we're told. Now, we do eventually get to see the boyfriend and we're led to believe that he's a musician. But, as they say, that's her story, that's her truth. But
Mm-hmm.
um, as we said in the last episode, the 80s were a very important part in entertainment culture because we were being introduced to things like The Cosby Show, which introduced to people the idea that people who were not white led the same lives as them. And there were
Mm-hmm.
people who worked hard for their existence and became doctors and lawyers. And, they weren't privileged people. So they
Mm-hmm.
had to earn their place. But Marissa was a woman, again, who was expecting a child, and she didn't have a job. She didn't have a stable relationship. Her boyfriend is out gallivanting the universe. And here she comes across her neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
who who is an artist in the same idea. She's attracted to men with passion, and suddenly her neighbor finds himself out on his own. His girlfriend has decided to leave him.
Mm-hmm.
Why, Matt? Because he likes old things. And
Yeah.
what about the building that they're living in brings that out, Matt?
Well, yeah, because it is a dilapidated old building, but it also has architectural design where they were trying to actually get it to be named a historical landmark, and because it's beautiful, but it's also old and falling apart. So, but this has a cast that is somewhat diverse, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Um, but it 80s movies and later tend to kind of throw in a number of different, like, so honestly I was surprised that there wasn't an Asian character put in here,
Hmm.
just to kind of round out the cast, because there was uh, we're going to talk about Frank McKay in a minute, who was an African American actor, and then we had Elizabeth Pena, and then we had, of course, the older folks, and then we had the young white guy, and that was it, right? It was
Right.
like five of them, right?
Hmm.
And then of course we had little mechanical. So we had the little datas. So we had the mechanoid Americans. Um, but it was so refreshing because it was an 80s movie and nobody cared. Nobody talked about the differences. Nobody, and 80s was a time when, there was always going to be some reference made to something, but there wasn't any in there.
Mm. They almost carefully picked each member of the cast in a way.
Mm-hmm.
You think, and yes, it's going to be a Star Trek reference, but we're trying to present a hopeful idea of community, of diversity, and for the most part, each person who is a neighbor in this building comes from a different place in life or a different background. So you have the older
Yes.
couple who maybe not have the same expectations of what's coming down the pike, but then you also have this young woman who may be on the verge of raising a family and
Mm-hmm.
has no stability in her life. And then you have an artist who for all intents and purposes should have no obstacles because he's white and male, but
Right.
he's also an artist, so he's not earning a paycheck on Wall Street. He's not going to be able to buy a DeLorean when they're cool.
Exactly. And then rounding out the cast is, an African American boxer. He's a big guy. He looks like he's probably had one too many punches, and
Hmm.
people mistake his lack of communication for a lack of, for like brain damage, probably from his boxing days.
Yeah.
And it turns out that no, he's uh,
Kind of a
very
gentle
talented.
he's a
Yeah,
gent he's a gentle giant.
right. He just communicates a little bit differently, but he certainly knows his way around electronics.
Hmm. So we'll bundle this together here. We're going to talk
Yeah.
about Mr. Frank McRae. But as we move along into the story, the second act, the meat in the sandwich, if you will, is complication, because there's a twist. The the meager few tenants of the relic, and we'll call it that because it's a piece of art that's seen better days. They were once hopeless, but now have had their faith restored by the aliens, who just happen to resemble robots. So, it kind of introduces that idea gently. There's many a sci-fi novel where aliens present themselves as a familiar image so that they are easier to accept. So here we have robots who happen to be aliens, and Faye, who's Jessica Tandy's character, the sweet older lady, she becomes fixated on the now more frequent visit by Carlos, who is the land developer's flunky, the guy who was sent to get them to move out. And Jessica Tandy's character sees qualities in him that makes her think of her lost son, Bobby. So, we'll talk about that after I tell you about the superintendent, who is played by Mr. Harry Noble. Now, Frank McRae played Harry Noble, the superintendent of the relic, and he sadly passed away more recently in 2021. He was an American actor and former pro NFL football player, because to see this guy, you were not going to cut in front of him in line. He was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and attended Tennessee State University. So he was a Southern gentleman. He earned a double major in drama and history. So, he could talk his way through a cocktail party. And his athletic prowess led him to the NFL, where he played as a defensive tackle for the Chicago Bears in the 67 season. So, maybe you were privileged enough to see him in a play or something, and you were going to bring here Sports Illustrated to get him to autograph it. After football, he transitioned to acting because once you're hurt on the field, there's only so much else you can do. He made his mark with a memorable role as a bank robber, Reed Youngblood, in Dillinger in 73, which we may get back to it. It's not a familiar film for me, but he became known for playing a tough, larger-than-life, or rather, he became known for playing tough, larger-than-life characters, which in the biz we call them a character actor, because that's what they do. And it included a shouting police captain in the film 48 Hours in 82. This was a role he later parried in Last Action Hero in 93, which that was Bruce Willis, right?
Yes.
Okay. Other notable roles included Sharky in the James Bond film License to Kill, which, based on 89, I want to say that was probably Timothy Dalton, but I don't know. And boxing champion Harry Noble, of course, in tonight's film, the film 87, batteries not included. Now, Frank McRae had a natural flair for comedy and appeared alongside John Candy, believe it or not, in the film of 79 called 1941. And he was also in National Lampoon's Vacation with the guy that we don't talk about back in 83. The one who had his own late night show and once did a commercial for Doritos. Yeah. Frank McRae's final roles were in Hallmark Channel films, so maybe he was in some of the Cronyn and Tandy films. We don't know.
Could very well be.
Yeah. Now, as I said, he passed away more recently in 2021 at the age of 80. So dialing it back to Act 2, when things get complicated.
Real quick, let's do just a quick correction. So Last Action Hero was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Mr. Predator, Mr. Terminator.
Yes. Okay.
So bringing us back to the complication here, and the folks who had maybe lost hope now have had their faith restored in humanity because someone's looking out for them. And I think that the most charming thing about how the aliens are revealed to the tenants of the building is the fact that things that were broken are now miraculously being replaced like new. And for anybody who hasn't watched this film, it's one of those films, like most that I enjoy most, that watching it over and over, you notice more things, like the fact that when Harry, who is played by Hume Cronyn, I'm not sorry, not Harry, Frank, who is played by Hume Cronyn, is having a moment where he thinks his wife has gone off the deep end because
Mhm.
she's playing with the cereal bowls in the kitchen
Mhm.
after she has come across the aliens on her rooftop. And he's sitting down to call the retirement home that he thinks they should consider because their neighbors, the friends that used to look out for his wife while he was running the diner downstairs, had disappeared to when the developer basically bribed them with money. Please move out so I could tear down this building. So he's sitting there on the phone, and here's another one of those examples of how direction can play an important part in the revealing of a story. Had Frank not have had as long a time on the phone before the retirement home's receptionist picked up, he would
Mhm.
not have looked up on the mantle from the fireplace to see the picture that had been broken by
Mhm.
Carlos when he bashed up his diner, sitting there repaired, new, like new, and that caused him to wonder, how did that happen? I saw it with my own eyes. It was busted up. So he's questioning what's going on. And maybe his wife is having this episode because she's gotten excited by something out of the ordinary.
Mhm. Yeah. Of course, what the thing that I found kind of interesting was that uh, these little robot people could put together paper and wood and glass and things. How do you restore a photo from torn up paper? I don't know, but little robots can, and little robots did.
And it was just so interesting how the things that they fixed were so visible. I mean, if it was just a matter of somebody losing their keys or their wallet, those are everyday things that you just dismiss as you
Right.
being careless and you lost it. But the things that made a difference were the things that were repaired. The picture that he noticed, the
The
Virgin Mary's
statue.
Jew,
Yeah. Hmm.
and the door to the artist's
Hmm.
apartment, things that they were not going to go without noticing.
Mm.
So suddenly, acts of kindness are happening in the building, and they are random acts of kindness. And
Mm.
so this is almost one of those sermons that you might hear when you're being brainwashed. Oops, did I say that out loud? Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it's true. Of all the major religions of the world, they have common threads, and that is to be kind to others, that you can make a difference in someone's life. So these people who have their hopes and dreams shattered and are in different places in their lives suddenly are having kind gestures made for them by complete strangers.
Mm. Yes, it was wonderful, and it gave them the first spark of hope when they were still feeling hopeless.
And so that's the complication, because before now, the land developer had them over a barrel. He had money that he could wave in front of their faces, and sure, some of them took it, but this ragtag team of few people that were left in the building had devotion. They were going to stand their grounds, even though the time was coming for that page to turn. Well, suddenly these robots from the sky have put their hands down on the book and said basically, don't be in a hurry to turn that page. We're here now. Think about what's
Yeah.
happening. it's
Right.
and there's a little bit of an element in here that I'll mention before we move on to our next actor. So there's a wonderful scene in the beginning of the film, or at least in the early parts of the movie, after we encounter the fixers, is what Faye calls them, the fix-it guys, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Frank is in the diner with Mason, the artist, and they're talking about this miracle basically that's happened, because they call anything that's unexplained a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And so Frank says to Mason, who is trying to figure out, the secret to what makes them tick. He literally gets out the magnifying glass to look inside one of the robots, and his magnifying glass is smacked away.
Mm-hmm.
And so Frank says to him in this wonderful moment that the quickest way to end a miracle is to ask it why.
Right. Yes, it's
So
true.
it's like looking a gift horse in the mouth, as they say. You don't question someone's motives when there's a kind gesture. You just experience the moment and maybe return the favor when it's your turn. But so that is the complication. And we just talked about Mr. Frank McRae, who played the gentle giant, the superintendent, who, in his own way, was trying to restore the building, but he was possibly the most broken of all of them because he was trying to do it on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And this brings us to the resolution, which we may actually save towards later in the show because it reveals a little bit more. But at some point, the building actually goes down in flames, and we will get back to that. But the people in the building realized that there was something special that they had, which now that the building is gone, their home is gone, they realized it was possibly something that they had all along, but
Mm-hmm.
there was a force that united them. And we'll get back to that because it's a very important part of the story. It involves the leading lady having a crisis of faith and actually having to face her fears and come to terms with reality. So, oh, we'll get back to that. So, Matt, let's see. What shall we talk about in relation to Act 2 or 3? Maybe we'll just talk about some of the trivia, do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you when when I watched it, because I was watching it this morning, and I noticed that when he goes up on Frank McKay's character goes up on the roof to try to call them with the dog whistle, um, there was a big banner for a theater show, and it was Lily Tomlin's "The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe" on a big marquee downtown.
He froze.
I chuckled and made a note of it because that was really fun.
And I
That was
think that
really fun.
and I think the poster for that actually said that it was either produced or directed by a woman who we knew to be her future wife.
Yes. Oh gosh, her name just left me, but yes, the two of them actually, yeah, the two of them did that whole, like, I think they kind of wrote it and directed it together.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, Wagner, it's not coming to me. But anyway, yes, that was fun to see there, and it was perfect. It was a perfect little thing to include, and very timely for that period as well.
Mm-hmm. And for anyone who may have experienced New York or Manhattan, now I for one grew up in another part of New York. It was actually a 6-hour drive to New York City from where I grew up. To put things into perspective, New York State is big enough that you could fit the entire country of Ireland inside of it. So Um, I'm not just going to walk down the corner and you know have a coffee at the Empire State Building. Um,
Yes.
but this
Right.
movie presented a darker side of New York that in its time had lots of adult movie theaters and a lot of sex workers walking the streets. And, some will credit a conservative mayor for cleaning that up, but it's well intact in Batteries Not Included because you see all of the bright lights of the city and
Mm.
all of the billboards and things that might not exist later on because you don't have um, the uh, the interesting nightlife anymore.
That's true. By the way, Jane Wagner is Lily Collins'
Jane
name.
Wagner, and of
Yes.
course we knew it wasn't Lyle.
Right. Although he could have been mine. Anyway, moving on. So yes, um, and then what was it? After the movie, Jessica Tandy and Hume Cronyn actually would only appear in 3 more movies together, and we talked about them. That was really sad. After
He's
so many together.
he survived her by a decade. The poor man.
Oh wow, they were so good together, and they were so good in this movie. Yeah. Now, did you know that there was a horror film that came out about the same time that
Hmm.
was going to be titled Batteries Not Included?
Hmm.
Yeah. So it had to change its name though because this film came out first. Now, guess the name of that movie.
It wasn't something funny happened on the way to the forum. I know that.
No, but that was definitely a horrific film. No, it was Child's Play. Now, I think that Child's Play, I think Batteries Not Included would have been a perfect name for that too.
It just reminds me of the things from that era. My husband recently picked up a Teddy Ruxpin doll at a thrift store. It-
Oh,
and now, of course, it should be known that they allegedly had special tapes that were made just for that doll. But
yes.
but a favorite guilty pleasure of people is to stick in any audio cassette to those machines so that it would, have Teddy Ruxpin doing lyrics for Metallica or whatever.
Girls
But
just want to have fun. Teddy Ruxpin
exactly.
style. Huh?
But supposedly not using the tapes that were originally made for that device will harm it.
That's sad.
Child's play.
No, thank you.
So one of the things that I enjoyed about Batteries Not Included was the music. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember in that time frame, I was in a band and choir in school. And I really, even though pop music was my first love, studying an instrument opened my mind to the possibility of other genres of music. And I still to this day enjoy jazz music. I actually even donate to one of the country's last independent jazz stations. They don't have any public funding. They're not affiliated with NPR. But
Huh.
some of the music that was featured in this movie are from what's known as the big band era, like with
Mm-hmm.
Benny Goodman, and um, it's interesting to see that nowadays there has been sort of a resurgence in the popularity of this music because people have learned that one of the ways that people from days gone by kept in shape was they would go out dancing. And it's there's nothing more adorable than seeing people get down to music that was new when their grandparents were courting.
Mm-hmm.
But some of this music from that big band era is what they call swing music. And this was music that was featured in over the summer before we said goodbye for the season. We
Mm-hmm.
talked about A League of Their Own, and they played music from the swing period of music in the roadhouse that the girls stopped by. And that swing music is such a active form of dance that
Mm-hmm.
it's almost a measurement of how in shape a performer is because you can't do swing dance for any amount of time and not be completely exhausted, because it's not ballroom dancing. You're not just gently turning somebody and dipping somebody. You're jumping over them. You're doing flips and very exhausting things. So anyways, swing music was a part of the melody of Batteries Not Included, and in many ways, like classic movies where they had instrumental soundtracks and there were melodies for each character, like in plays, the swing music was there to illustrate the fact that Frank and Faye may be older people on the outside, but on the inside, they are these young people who got down, dancing
Down and funky with it. Yep.
with the swing music when it was new.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that's interesting about this is that you can hear some of the same music at different points in this movie that you could in Cocoon: The Return, which came out a year later. So, and again, starred the two of them, Hume and Jessica. So, yeah. But who was offered a part in this movie and turned it down? S.A. Morales. Now, he probably made a good call, actually, because he was, I don't know, I think he would have been kind of wasted in the part of the bad guy here. But he actually turned it down because he was going to be in La Bamba, and he chose that because his last name is the same as the character that was in La Bamba, and he kind of felt it was a sign and had a connection. And so he was in that film. And of course, who was his co-star?
Lou Diamond Phillips.
Well, yes, and Elizabeth Pena.
Aha!
She was also in that movie. And the two of them, got together in that. Even if they weren't in this one, they got to be in that one together. So, and it was probably a good call for him, though. Because I think the guy that played, what's his name? I can't remember his name. That she kept mistaking as his son, the kind of bad guy.
Oh, the character is Carlos, anyways.
Yes. So I think the actor who played Carlos was perfect for this role. So yeah. But and then of course, you want to talk about the dog whistle?
Of course.
So anyway, so the caretaker Harry, he summons the babies when they get lost because they get scared and there was a big attack, and he summons them by taking a bullhorn and blowing a dog whistle into it. But when he leaves the building, you hear roar, 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 roar. Well, you think that's added. You think, oh, that's funny. It's added. Well, some of it wasn't. Some of the dogs actually were real dogs that were barking in response to the whistle.
So dialing it back to the resolution there, Matt.
Yeah.
So Faye.
Let's dial.
Right. I mean, we are one to talk about nostalgia, and what's more nostalgic than a rotary dial? So Faye, Jessica Tandy's character, has convinced herself that this young man who keeps showing up is her son, who in reality passed away long before his time, years and years ago, through a tragic accident. But it makes her happy to think about those days, so why not? That's something that anybody who has spent time around older persons, maybe ones with mental health issues, would tell you. You don't fight the reality that they're living in. You embrace it, and you let them decide for themselves what they're experiencing.
Right. Now, see, I think it felt like they were leading us to believe in the beginning that her cognitive issues were because of her age. But as the movie kind of progressed, I think that they were kind of implying that they were brought on through her not being able to fully cope with the death of their son.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
She was traumatized, and so this was the reality that she's talked herself into because she was happy in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually it accomplishes some good for the purpose of the story, because you have Carlos's character who doesn't see himself as anyone greater than the man he works for. He aspires to be like Mr. Lacey, an entrepreneur, a man who pushes people around to accomplish his own goals, much like some people who are running for public office these days.
What? No way.
And does that by waving money in people's faces.
Mm-hmm.
And Jessica Tandy's character, Faye, serves an important part because she's the mother figure. And she talks to Carlos as though he and his father don't get along, which
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't know Carlos's father, but that also implies a truth that might actually be reality. Maybe Carlos doesn't know his father. And
Right.
that introduces doubt that maybe Carlos has sold people short. He hasn't given them a chance to show them who they are. He hasn't taken a chance on kindness. And now here's
Mm-hmm.
this older woman who doesn't even know him, who's not even related to him, who is showing him kindness. And sure, maybe the lights are on, but no one's home, but she's invited him to dinner. And if you grew
Mm-hmm.
up in a household where maybe there were old-fashioned values or traditional values or conservative, whatever, just plain good manners, when somebody invites you to dinner, that's a sign of respect. They enjoy your company, they want to spend
Mm-hmm.
more time with you, and now he's facing the reality that this person that he is trying to um, push around is not
Mm-hmm.
is not buying his act. They believe that he is a kind person, and so that causes him to question, am I doing the right thing? Should I be aspiring to be like my boss? Or is this at the end of the day just a paycheck, and is there something better for me?
Right. And I think that the scene where he saves her from the building and everything is really pivotal because it illustrates that there is a good person in him that is wanting to get out and just doesn't know how because of the product of his upbringing. So, and it was her and her kindness, even though she thought was, mistaking him as her son, it was that kindness that got him to really, say, to feel, to want to help her. So,
Yeah,
anyway.
they each made a difference in their own way, and
Hmm.
it sort of goes without saying is you can only imagine the ending of the story because it's just sort of a natural ending. They're brought together through a crisis. But one of the not difficult as in you can't watch it, but one of the most sort of heart-wrenching scenes, at least for me when I've watched it before, is when Carlos, this man who is bullying them,
Hmm.
decides to come visit her in the hospital because,
Yes.
spoiler, there's been a fire and she's an old woman. She could have been hurt. She might have been hurt. And he
Hmm.
shows up at the hospital with a gift for her. Now,
Yeah, he saved her.
yeah, and I won't tell you what happens because I think we both think that you should see this movie, but to experience that moment where he comes to visit her and she has had a turn of events that have caused her to come out of her shell
Mm-hmm.
It's just very it's a shake-up moment because now those two are in different places, and maybe now that she's quote unquote thinking a little bit more clearly,
Mm-hmm.
um, just as we said earlier in the movie, there were moments where characters related more because those boundaries were taken down. Now she's come to, and maybe she's thinking, I'm an old woman. Why would I take a chance on a young kid, a young punk like this, having any ounce of decency? Even though he's standing here in the hospital and he's come to visit me, I don't know this guy.
Yeah, I kind of got more of that now that she was out of it. She was still struggling because I mean there was so much blame from her for her husband and the past of the way that he and their son got along. I think that she was just too lost in that feeling
And it's something that I can also.
to even pay attention to that he was there is my
Mhm.
my point. Yeah. So,
I
go ahead.
and as I say, something that I can take to heart from this is that being not an only child, I have an older brother. I've been in a household where the male members maybe have butted heads. My brother and my dad were so much alike that they used to get into fights. And before my brother was done with high school, mom and dad actually kicked him out because he was hanging out with the wrong crowd. He was getting into trouble. Now, my
Mm.
poor older sister, unfortunately, had just gotten out on her own and gotten her own place. But now mom and dad have said, take care of your brother. He's moving in with you.
Mm,
So, kibosh in any relationship situation for poor sis at that time, anyway.
apparently, yeah.
So, yeah, I found this to be such a wonderful story because, as we said, it broke down boundaries and it presented the reality that we often have more things in common than you might be led to believe just because somebody grew up in a different culture, maybe somebody's younger or older. You can have things in common. And
Hmm.
certainly if you're neighbors, you should care that the building is on fire,
Right.
whether that's physically or just metaphorically. But
Hmm.
batteries not included is definitely a story that it needs to be beheld. I don't know that even in more recent years that there have been stories told like this. I won't say that modern film is not good, quote unquote, but I think
Hmm.
that there's something to be said from this period in our culture where we have, for lack of a better term, recycled stars from their twilight. They are people with talent that we've taken a chance on reviving, and we get the opportunity to tell a story like Batteries Not Included. You watched Batteries Not Included because the cute old couple that were in The World According to Garp were in it. And then you found out this is a movie that was produced by Steven Spielberg, and it
Hmm.
has heart.
Well, and not only that, but one of the things that I liked about it was on top of the simplicity and the heartwarming factor is there wasn't a lot of backstory into a lot, including you never got a super analysis, a scientific explanation for the aliens. You never learned about their home planet or where they came from. There was no verbal communication. There was just a simple kind of understanding. And that is something that wouldn't necessarily fly today because, I mean, hello, Star Wars went from feel the Force, Luke, into, oh, it's these little midichlorians that are born in the... And it's like, come on, just have the Force. And if this movie were made today, we would have ended up knowing all about their planet and their enemies and why they fled there and blah, blah, blah. And
all the
so,
medications that Faye was taking, which we actually did a
oh,
little
yes.
bit.
Yeah, but I mean, we would have had like these. Everyone would have gotten their 5-minute backstory, flashbacks, and everything, and it worked without it.
I mean, the most I could say would be if they were to try a story like this today, I think that the artist character would have taken to social media to try to get people to support the building staying up.
Yes, there would have been that too. Or they would have had, you know, Whoopi Goldberg's choir of nuns come sing, and yeah. So
I will say though that I think that aside from the moment where Frank says basically you don't question a miracle, I think that one of my favorite moments of the whole movie is when Mason's girlfriend has left him and he's thrown out all of his artwork because now he has no reason to continue. The hot young thing that he saw as his focus in life has left the Elvis has left the building.
Yes.
And
yeah.
what has happened to his artwork?
Right. So, of course, Elizabeth Pena says, wait a minute, that's beautiful. You shouldn't throw that out. So she takes it. And she takes it because I think she has a little bit of a crush on him. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And when is it revealed to him that his artwork has been saved?
When he likes her and bursts into her apartment to help her with supplies for her pregnancy because she's never even been to the doctor. So, you know, and there was no question, like he was interested in her without, you know, having to be like, I will step up and be the father of your baby. I will save your honor, blah, blah, blah. It was just a lovely little connection between the two of them. And that was what made it wonderful to watch.
And my favorite line was Elizabeth Pena when he has discovered that she's rescued his artwork, because there have been opportunities for him to come see her place, but she has just basically said it's a mess or whatever as an excuse not to let him in. Now he's seen the artwork and she says to him, what did she say?
She said, get your stuff and get out of here. No. She said that, well, she said it's hers now, and it's, you know, she's an art collector. And but she was explaining, what I love is that she was explaining what she saw in his art that he never saw. And I think it made him look at it from a different perspective.
You know, and as they say, a lot of artists will have a muse because
yes,
artists often have, or artists will, the artistic type people, and I say this as someone who's married to one, artists' brains are wired a certain way. You don't necessarily appreciate your own creations until you get feedback from somebody else. So people who are often said to be someone's muse is just simply that outsider who isn't the critical one who made that piece of art. They can now tell you why it's beautiful, not just tell you that it's beautiful. And that itself is the inspiration, what gives people drive to continue, because obviously you're going to see your own creation as being crap because it came from your own head. It's not until somebody else says, oh, wow, that's cool, until you think, maybe I should keep doing this.
Right. Yep.
But that's my favorite line, is when she says to him, you've made me an art collector. It was almost like that iconic line of I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille.
Well, and I thought it was also funny that in this very PG film, he painted her naked, even though he didn't paint her naked. He just used his imagination to. But it was still kind of like, oh dear, okay.
And she says to him, paint some clothes on her, and then the little alien robot's children are sitting on his art easel, and they very innocently drape a towel over them, like, don't look, children, mommy's naked.
Right.
So I would say that all the 80s films, even if you're not into glitz and glamour and just moments in history, this is an 80s film that you shouldn't turn up, because it has heart. It's a celebration of the human spirit. And I think you'll be taken by surprise, because it doesn't come off as a story that has that as its promise. You watch it and it's just this little old lady who's wandering the streets. It's like, I didn't expect that. These people came together when there was a crisis.
Right. Yep. They came together for each other, and it more than paid off. And the bad guy got it, had to give in to them, and I think that's wonderful.
So, Matt, we were here in this dead mall that you were kind enough to bring me to, and we're out here in front of the video store. Now, I can't help but notice that out here in the atrium in front of the store is one of those fountains. Now, were you the kind of kid who would throw coins into the fountain and make a wish?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, my mother would roll her eyes of, like, you're just wasting my money. But I was definitely that kid.
And I can't help but notice, though, that this fountain seems to be rather barren.
Yeah, well, who was here before us, so yeah. Need gas money for the truck. She's gonna do what she's gonna do.
Oh yes, well, speaking of Lula May, I guess we ought to get back out to the car, because the babysitter's got to go home. But Matt, if you would, reach into your pocket and get us that little game board piece so we can figure out what's coming up next. Oh, wait a minute.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
No, I'd like to recommend something. So actually, did you want to recommend a movie first?
Sure.
Okay.
I got some treats in my pocket here, and I mean, maybe I forgot them. I think that they've been through the wash. Yeah. Anyways, this is the glove box, because we found a few things that you might like. Maybe once we have I don't know, put them back in the fridge and let them solidify. I'm going to recommend. Right. Ooh, the best. Well, now, if Lula May made them, though,
careful.
Yes. Don't be giving those out to the kids at Halloween. So I'm going to be recommending a film from 2007. This is a comedy and a fantasy. Now, I thoroughly enjoyed this film because it has up-and-coming actress Natalie Portman after she was Luke's mommy in the Star Wars prequel movies there. And it starred Mr. Dustin Hoffman way, way, way after he was in such great movies as Rain
Man?
No, the drag movie.
Tootsie?
Yeah, long after he did Tootsie and Rain Man, and the one about the virus.
I don't know, but if it's got a virus in it, I don't want to know anything. Outbreak.
Yeah, Outbreak. Okay, so long after he did Tootsie, Rain Man, and Outbreak, in 2007, Natalie Portman was in a film with Dustin Hoffman called Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. And it's about the young apprentice of a magical, eccentric toy store owner learns to believe in herself and in her friends upon learning some grave news about the future. Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium from 2007.
Wow. That sounds really interesting. I have to watch that. I call for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valoran. So that's my Natalie Portman line. That all I hear is.
My first exposure to her was learning that she had fabulous hair. And many wardrobe changes, and she had body doubles, so she had to be important.
Yeah. And even it's funny, she was her own body double. No, so but yeah. So actually, I'd like to recommend a film that this kind of reminded me of, and it was about the same period. It was actually a year earlier. It was 1986, and it was a film about an experimental military robot that gets hit by lightning and is given consciousness. And so it escapes the military because it doesn't want to hurt anyone. And it befriends a young woman and is pursued by its creator. And of course, I'm talking about Short Circuit. Johnny Five is alive, with Ali Sheedy, Steve Guttenberg, and Fisher Stevens, with his very accent that would not fly these days. Yes. Johnny Five is alive, yeah. But but it was such a good movie, and another one that I watched many, many times. And yeah. So.
It's another movie that has heart and celebrates the human spirit, because it's about taking a chance on things and maybe not knowing not having all the answers. But anyways, I loved Short Circuit. And of course, if you haven't seen Short Circuit, where have you been? You probably did not have a Blockbuster membership. You've been living under a rock. And of course, Ali Sheedy was a member of the Brat Pack, and she played the antisocial goth girl who played with her dandruff in study hall. But she was my favorite character in Short Circuit because she was an animal lover.
Hi, my name's Ali Sheedy, and if you're gonna have sex, use condoms. Okay, and tell them Ali Sheedy told you to do that.
I just know.
Do you remember that commercial? Do you remember that?
No, but in more recent years, and I'm forgetting her name, but I have often confused Ali Sheedy with the actress that was the new Dr. Smith in the Netflix Lost in Space.
Okay. Yeah, I know who you mean. Yes. I can see that.
There is an age difference, but they do
very much
bear a resemblance to each other.
Now, you do know that Ali Sheedy was in was it called Single Drunk Girl on Hulu not long ago? She played the girl's mother. And she did a phenomenal job, but her character was like someone you're like, oh, I don't want to meet her.
Well, that reminds me of there was another 80s star, and I forgot her name now, but she got to be on it was a show that was like My Cousin Earl, but maybe it was Cloris Leachman was in this show where they had a kid that they were raising, and she was the grandma. It was a network TV show. And I don't remember it, but this 80s model turned actor must have had the time of her life, because she got to play the drunk neighbor, like very opposite of the type of characters that she always played. Maybe I'll look it up later and I'll send it to you.
All right.
Okay. Cool. So yes, Mr. Megoriums and Short Circuit. All right, Matt. So.
Yes.
Let's figure out what's coming up next. Take out that board game piece and give it a whirl.
Well, here we go. Ooh. I got twins. Oh, no. All right. Well, it looks like next we have During the Battle of Britain. Angela Lansbury plays a cunning witch in training who decides to use her supernatural powers to defeat the Nazi menace with the aid of 3 inventive children who have been evacuated from the London Blitz. Just in time for Halloween, it's 1971's Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
Oh, Bed, take us to the island of Naboombu.
Oh, oh, it's. I just watched this a couple years ago. I love this movie. It's so good.
And if ever we need to revisit a place in history, I think that we need Dame Angela Lansbury back so we can fight some Nazis, if you know what I'm
With,
saying, people.
with her three inventive children.
Who may or may not be
Yes.
biologically related.
Because when I think of three inventive children and a witch, I'm thinking kill some Nazis.
Somewhere in there is a Randy Rainbow song, I'm sure.
Probably.
And we are heading into that season, not only of doom and gloom, folks, but we are in North America coming up to an important decision-making time. And you have a place, you have a role to take in the direction of the future. Now, I am speaking to you as a person who has been displaced. If you've been paying attention to our storyline, I am out on the road and I found myself in this little town in middle America, and I've been fortunate enough to meet the kindness of folks like Matt and everybody else here in Gopher Gulch. But I was a responsible person, and I got my mail-in ballot. So, if
Yes.
nothing else, you should learn from fabulous women like Jessica Tandy. You need to take part in history, and you need to get out there and vote this season.
That is true, and we've already taken care of ours. This whole town has already voted, and well,
We're hubby and I are going to go do our early voting next weekend. In fact, no, actually, no, it's in 2 weeks. We get to vote the weekend before Halloween, so I am looking forward to that because back, in 2020, I remember standing in line at our county building to do early voting, and yes, we were wearing masks.
This is Halloween. This is Halloween. Well, in Halloween you wear masks, right?
Right. Well, hopefully after this Halloween, there's a little bit less orange in our lives. Oh, did I say that out loud? Maybe I did. But I'm assuming if you're still listening, you're not offended.
Probably not. If you made it through our topics of the day,
yes. I mean,
you're probably in line with what we're thinking.
Yeah. Especially a movie about an expecting woman who hasn't been shamed.
Right? They would have been like, oh, they better marry her off real quick. The father better come back and, make an honest woman out of her.
Right. I mean,
whatever.
That's another thing that would be slightly different. Mason would have gone on social media to save the building, but I think that Marissa would have had her an OnlyFans so that she could have some money to take care of the baby.
Oh my stars.
To quote Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, me perform.
Well, and the bad guy would have been gay, and yeah.
He would have had a thing for Hume Cronyn's character.
Right. Well, actually, it was funny because I was thinking, I was wondering if the land developer trying to destroy the building would turn out to be their son. And, well, that didn't work. But I was like, I could just see that plot twist happening. But that was more of a 90s movie.
Right, a Shamalama Ding Dong.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'll stop the recording.